Episode 1 starts with Haruto, a young boy, leaving his hometown despite his childhood friend Michan's tearful plea. He holds her hands and promises her that he'll be back to pick her up once he grows up. This scene is a flashback as Haruto, now older, rides a bus. Suddenly, a train crashes into the bus, killing everyone on board. In the Kingdom of Beltrum, year 991 of the Holy, in early spring, Haruto awakes in a darkened room, now in the body of a malnourished boy. Confused and with mixed memories, he's no longer certain if he's still Haruto from Japan or this wretched boy. As he grapples with his identity, a group of men enter, address him as Ryo, and enter the food they brought, ignoring his hunger. To make things worse, the thugs complain that he stinks and is ruining their meal, so they send him out to take a bath. But instead, hungry, Ryo searches for berries in the bushes. While foraging, Haruto's memories surface and he recalls being a 20-year-old student from Japan. Despite the flashbacks, he forces himself to forget his past. For now, he is Ryo, a poor boy living in the slums of the Kingdom of Beltrum. He starts to think about getting revenge for his mother, who was killed by a stranger. He remembers living with her in a little hut, and her stories about their home, a place where everyone had dark hair. But his thoughts are stopped when 4 people wearing white clothes come to him and ask if he has seen a girl with purple hair. Initially intimidated, he relaxes when the white-haired girl, Celia, introduces herself and asks more politely. Ryo tells them he hasn't seen the girl. Celia casts a spell to detect nearby magic users and notices Ryo has a lot of magic power. Although they don't find the girl, Celia gives Ryo a bag of coins as thanks before they leave. Ryo hides the coins in his clothes and returns to the house where he woke up. He is immediately attacked by a masked man, but the assailant's knife hits the bag of coins, leaving Ryo unharmed. But just as he's about to continue his attack, suddenly time freezes. A ghostly image of a pink-haired girl appears to him. She touches his cheeks and shows him how to use his magical abilities. Ryo begins to glow with magic, and when time resumes, he combines his new powers with the martial arts moves he learned from Haruto. Using the knowledge from the pink-haired girl, he casts a spell to make himself stronger and knocks out the masked man. After defeating the man, he hears noises coming from a bag in the room. Inside, he finds a purple-haired girl. She asks him to take her to the royal castle, but she faints when she sees the unconscious masked man. Ryo decides to take her to the castle, but the people in white robes from earlier spot him. The people in white robes assume Ryo is one of the kidnappers and take him to the castle for questioning. Meanwhile, the royal guards search the house where Ryo was attacked and find the masked man who has regained consciousness. But before they can question him, a mysterious hooded man, watching from a distance, crushes a red crystal, causing the suspect to die, foaming at the mouth. In a dungeon under the castle, Ryo is severely tortured by Charles, the vice-captain of the Knights. Charles wants Ryo to confess to being one of the princess's abductors, but Ryo maintains his innocence. Later, the purple-haired girl, who is Princess Flora, wakes up in her room. Celia and a pink-haired woman named Vanessa, who is watching over her, tell her what happened while she was unconscious. Princess Flora immediately asks to see Ryo, so they take her to the dungeon. As they enter, Celia and Vanessa are shocked by the sight of Ryo's severe injuries inflicted by Charles. Flora explains that Ryo is innocent and was the one who saved her from the kidnappers. She rushes to Ryo's side and asks Charles to release him. Using her special magical abilities, Celia heals Ryo's wounds and he passes out. Later, Ryo wakes up in one of the palace rooms where Celia apologizes to him for the royal guard's mistreatment. She also informs him that the king would like to thank him for saving the Princess Flora. In the royal throne room, the king sits with the queen and his 2 daughters, Princess Flora and Christina. Ryo, now cleaned up with a nice haircut and new clothes, is brought before them. The king thanks him for saving Princess Flora and decides to show his gratitude by allowing him to attend the Beltrum Royal Academy. Ryo accepts the offer and enrolls in primary school. However, when Celia, who is a teacher in the school, introduces him to his classmates, Ryo feels out of place. The noble students make fun of him for being a commoner, After school, Rio visits Celia at her research lab and asks her to teach him how to read and write. Celia reveals that she's only 12 years old but skipped all the grades until she graduated because she was so brilliant. While tutoring Rio, Celia notices that he gets all the answers in the assignment correct, so she tells him that Princess Christina is the only other person in the class who also got all the answers correct. Sometime later, Rio's class takes part in combat lessons and sword fighting. The students use wooden swords to spar with each other, and Rio uses the knowledge of martial arts he gained as Haruto in his past life to excel in the tests. He impresses the instructor with his excellent swordsmanship, who offers him a chance to join the Royal Knights. However, Rio politely declines the offer. One day, Rio starts to remember his past life as Haruto and his childhood friend, Miharu. Frustrated with himself for being stuck in the past, Rio decides to concentrate on his new life and move forward. 5 years later, Rio is selected to represent the Beltrum Royal Academy in a tournament against the Royal Guards. However, another student named Alphonse disagrees with the choice and believes Rio shouldn't have been chosen because of his commoner status. At school, Rio helps Celia in the library, and she commends him for his tremendous progress since he enrolled in the academy 5 years ago. He responds by teasing her about how she hasn't grown since they first met. The two have tea, and Rio reveals that he would like to travel to his parents' homeland in the Yagamo region after graduation, especially because of how badly he's treated by other students. Sometime later, the exhibition tournament between the Beltrum Royal Academy and the Royal Guards commences. Alfred, the referee, begins the first match, which is between Rio and Charles, the vice-captain of the Guards, who tortured him 5 years ago. Charles attempts to intimidate Rio by mocking him, but he is unfazed and prepares to have his revenge. The duel begins and the two fight intensely, clashing their wooden swords and using all the skills at their disposal. Rio counters all of Charles' attacks, pushing him to fight with anger. Charles charges at Rio, giving everything he's got in a desperate attempt to win. However, Rio gets the upper hand and knocks his sword out of his hands, defeating him. Charles reluctantly accepts defeat and leaves in disappointment. Later that night, Charles meets with an ominous blue-haired man as they drink together. It is revealed that the guest is the ambassador from the Praxia Empire. When Charles tells him that Rio was involved when Flora was abducted 5 years ago, the guest becomes interested. It turns out that the guy is the hooded figure who killed the masked assailant by crushing a red crystal. One day, during a class on magic, Celia asks the student to cast a spell to create a sphere of light. While the other royal students can do it easily, Rio struggles and they mock him for it. However, Rio possesses a unique kind of magic that is different from theirs, and he doesn't fully understand his abilities. To avoid any unnecessary attention, he keeps his powers hidden from everyone. After class, Rio is accused of seducing the female students by a royal student named Stuart. However, Celia quickly intervenes to defend Rio, causing Stuart to leave him alone. But before he goes, he warns Rio not to anger him because he's from the powerful house of Hubanon. Later, the students go outside for a practical lesson where they must work as a team to reach a goal by passing through the mountain forests. Alphonse serves as the leader of the team and leads them through the forest. He makes Rio carry the group members' bags, claiming it's because Rio doesn't have any magic and wouldn't be useful in fighting monsters. However, it's quite obvious that it's just because he doesn't like him. Regardless, Rio accepts the job and the group begins their journey. Along the way, they encounter a horde of goblins. The boys enhance their physical abilities with magic so they can fight the goblins. After defeating the goblins, the group continues along the path. However, the ambassador from Praxia is watching Rio from the shadows, intending to test his abilities. The ambassador believes Rio possesses a special kind of magic called spirit magic. Soon the group reaches the end of the path and finds themselves on the edge of a cliff. Suddenly, they're ambushed by huge orcs with spears. During the fight, Stuart gets injured and trips, accidentally pushing Flora off the cliff. Rio quickly notices and jumps down to save her. He catches her and pushes her back onto the cliff, but he falls down below. After defeating the orcs, Alphonse leads the team, but the students accuse Stuart of pushing Flora off the cliff. Stuart lies and blames Rio, but Flora defends him. However, the other students believe Stuart. Suddenly, a huge minotaur attacks them, and most of the students run away, but Flora stays behind to heal the injured students. As the minotaur tries to attack Flora, Rio returns and cuts off its arm. He asks Flora to escape with the others before resuming his battle. Eventually, Rio defeats the minotaur by decapitating it, but he runs away before the other students can see him. They all believe that he pushed Flora off the cliff. Days after the incident in the forest, Rio is assumed missing by the school. Celia overhears Duke Huguenot, Stuart's father, planning to publicly accuse Rio of pushing Princess Flora off the cliff, even though he knows it's not true. Rio secretly visits Celia in her lab, and she's relieved to see him safe. She informs him of the Duke's plot, but Rio is not concerned. To avoid further trouble, he decides to travel to the Yagama region where his ancestors lived. He promises Celia that he'll return and tells her that he'll use the alias Haruto. When he leaves, Celia feels heartbroken because she has developed feelings for him. After 3 days of traveling, Rio arrives in the Kingdom of Galark. He stops at a market town to buy food and leaves to continue his journey through the forest. Someone follows him, but Rio doesn't notice. In the forest, he finds an unconscious beast girl. When he approaches her, she wakes up and spits poison at him. Rio kicks her away, but his vision blurs from the toxin. He sees her animal ears and realizes she's a beast girl. Rio uses his magic to neutralize the poison. The girl tries to kill Rio and attacks him with her knives, but he pins her down. Rio calms her with a sleep spell and notices a collar of submission on her neck. He uses a magic spell he learned from a book to remove it. In a flashback, we learn that the beast girl's name is Latifa, and she died in the same accident as Haruto. She was reincarnated as a beast in the same fantasy world. Rio removes the collar of submission from Latifa, and she wakes up thanking him with tears of joy. She explains that she doesn't know anything about her master except for Stuart's name. Rio realizes that it's the same Stuart from the Royal Academy, and that Latifa was sent to kill him by the Huguenot family. She was trapped in a dungeon where Stuart would treat her cruelly every day. Rio assures Latifa that he won't let her master harm her again, and she promises not to try to kill him anymore. He sets her free from her restraints, and she asks to follow him on his journey since he's also headed east. Rio agrees, and they travel together to a place called the Wilderness, where beast people and demi-humans live together in peace. They face many dangerous adventures together. One night, Latifa talks in her sleep about her parents in Tokyo. Rio realizes that she died in the same accident as him, but decides not to tell her. One night, Latifa has a nightmare, and Rio uses his magic to calm her down. He notices that the fire outside their camp has gone out and goes to investigate. Rio sees a large wolf that disappears into a blinding light. Using his magic, he detects 3 demi-humans near the hut. 2 of them find Latifa asleep and think that Rio kidnapped her since she was put to sleep using spirit magic. One of the demi-humans, Uzuma, attacks Rio with a powerful magic blast, causing him to pass out. When Rio wakes up, he finds himself tied to a bed by the demi-humans. Latifa wakes up and rushes to check on him. She realizes what happened, and the demi-human girls apologize to Rio for capturing him. They remove his restraints, and among them, a demi-human named Ursula says that he can stay. The next morning, Rio wakes up in the village where the demi-humans took him. Their leader, Ursula, shows him around the place. She takes him to a huge tree called the Ward Tree, where Dryas, the spirit of the mighty tree, resides. Afterward, Ursula takes Rio to a conference room, where a dwarf named Dominic and an elf named Sildora wait for him. In the meeting, the elders apologize for the earlier misunderstanding and thank Rio for saving Latifa from slavery. As a show of gratitude, they ask him what he would like from them in exchange. Rio asks to stay in the village and learn about the spirit arts and the village's traditions. They gladly accept his requests. Suddenly, a green-haired girl appears, levitating. Rio discovers that she is Dryas, the spirit of the world tree. Dryas senses his spirit inside Rio and assumes that he made a contract with it. However, Rio doesn't remember anything of that sort. Dryas touches his face and confirms that he has an insane amount of magical energy inside him. She tells him that he has that much power because there's a spirit sleeping inside him. Later, Orphea takes Rio to a house where Latifa and other demi-human girls wait for him. They all have dinner together, and afterward, a cat named Sarah tells Rio and Latifa that they'll be staying with her, Orphea, and another demi-human girl named Alma. As time goes on, the people of the village teach Rio the spirit arts and combat while he gets more familiar with them and helps them with everyday tasks. Elsewhere, the ambassador from Proxia, whose name is revealed to be Reese, rides a griffin with a blonde-haired young man to the entrance of a cave. Reese goes into the cave while the young man waits outside. A short while later, Reese emerges from the cave with a huge wyvern egg and hands it to the young man. The two then continue their journey with the egg on their griffin. 1 year after settling in the forest village, Rio and the villagers celebrate the spirit festival with a feast. Meanwhile, Reese and the young man stop to rest in a forest. Reese gives the man a red pill, telling him to swallow it so he can track him. The young man takes the pill without hesitation. Reese leaves to inspect the area, making the young man stay behind to watch the egg. Rio takes Latifa for a walk in the forest during the spirit festival. He tells her that his time in the forest village is coming to an end and he wants to continue his journey to the land of his ancestors. This means he will have to leave soon. Latifa expresses her desire to follow him, but Rio refuses, explaining that he doesn't know how dangerous the rest of his journey will be and doesn't want to put her in harm's way. However, Latifa doesn't want to be separated from Rio and gets upset. Rio tries to calm her down, but she runs away from him in tears. In the Wyvern Cave, Reese is stealing the remaining eggs and transporting them elsewhere, while flying on his griffin. The demi-humans spot the blonde boy in the forest and decide to investigate. They approach him, but he gets scared and escapes on the griffin. As he flies away, the wyverns start chasing him towards the village. Sarah notices this and alerts the others. Latifa distracts the wyvern so that Alma and the others can attack it. However, Latifa gets trapped herself, and just as the beast is about to attack her, Rio appears and saves her. Rio uses his magic to enhance his powers and fights the wyvern with his fists and feet. The wyvern tries to unleash a powerful, fiery attack on Rio, but he counters it by conjuring a large ball of energy and shooting it into the wyvern's mouth, killing it. With the largest wyvern defeated, the others retreat, and the demi-humans are amazed by how easily Rio killed the most powerful wyvern. The next day, Latifa finally accepts that Rio is leaving, and she reveals that she was once a human in Japan, but died and reincarnated into this fantasy world. Rio already knew this, and he tells her that he too was reincarnated into the realm. As a parting gift, Dominic gives Rio a mithril sword to channel his spirit magic and a black suit of armor made from wyvern skin. Rio then bids farewell to the elders and villagers. The elves gift Rio with potions and medicines, while the beast people provide him with food and supplies. Sildora presents him with a magical storage device to keep all his gifts during his journey. Rio expresses his gratitude to them and promises to return to help them if they ever need it. He then shares a heartfelt goodbye with Latifa before leaving. 2 weeks have passed and Rio finds himself in the Yagumo region. He hasn't discovered any clues about his parents. He reaches Karasuki village and meets Yuba, the village chief, and an elderly woman. When Rio inquires about his father, Zen, and mother, Ayame, Yuba identifies them and reveals she is Rio's grandmother and Zen's mother. She guides him to his parents' grave, where Rio offers his respects. Yuba explains that his parents had to depart from the village many years ago for reasons she can't reveal just yet. She invites Rio to stay with her in the village until she's prepared to share more, and he agrees. At Yuba's house, Rio meets his cousin, Ruri. The next day, Rio begins assisting with household tasks and learns that both Yuba and Ruri possess the ability to use spirit magic, just like him. Later that afternoon, Sio and her brother Shin join Ruri and Rio for lunch. Afterward, Shin invites Rio to go hunting in the forest. They come across a hunter named Dola, and despite Shin's many attempts, he doesn't catch anything. However, Rio proves to be a natural hunter and succeeds on his first try, making Shin jealous. As Rio spends more time in the village, he becomes increasingly familiar with the villagers and assists them with various tasks. He quickly becomes popular and well-liked by everyone in Karasuki. One day, Yuba asks Ryo for a favor. She needs him to escort some traders to the royal capital to sell rice. Ryo accepts the task, but their conversation is interrupted by a heated argument between Shin and a pompous man named Gon. Gon, the son of a neighboring village's leader, insists on staying at Yuba's home while his cart for transporting goods is repaired. During a heated argument, Gon declares his intention to marry Ruri, Yuba's only heir. This infuriates Shin, who attacks Gon, but he is quickly overpowered by the larger man. As Gon begins to choke Shin, Yuba intervenes and breaks up the fight. Yuba decides to overlook the incident and allows Gon to stay in a guest house until his cart is fixed. To keep Ruri safe from Gon, Yuba invites Seo to stay with them. The argument and subsequent fight leave the villagers feeling uneasy, and tensions between Gon and Shin remain high. Despite this, Ryo continues to help out in the village and becomes increasingly popular among the villagers. That night, Ryo gives Ruri a redstone, claiming it to be a protective talisman, and tells her to keep it safe in her room. Meanwhile, Gon and his friends are drinking and chatting in the guest house, revealing that they intentionally sabotaged their cart to stay in Karasuki village longer and carry out a malicious scheme. The next day, a kind man named Hayat arrives on horseback, introducing himself as a tax inspector. He examines the villagers' crops and later has dinner at Yuba's house. However, that night, trouble arises when Gon sneaks into Ruri and Seo's room while they sleep, attempting to execute his sinister plan. Ryo, who had sensed Gon's presence due to the protective talisman he gave Ruri, enters the room just in time. Overwhelmed with anger, Ryo attacks Gon, not only because he invaded the girl's room, but also because he resembles the man who murdered Ryo's mother. Ryo's punches are fierce, almost killing Gon. As Gon's plan is about to succeed, Hayat enters the room just in time to intervene. Using his magical abilities, Hayat heals Gon's severe injuries and reassures Ryo that he will take the intruder to a prison camp the following day. Afterward, Ryo goes outside to clear his mind and reflect on recent events. He realizes that he had completely forgotten about his mission to avenge his mother's death. Ryo acknowledges how much life has changed since Haruto's memories and personality became intertwined with his own. He realizes and recognizes that he almost killed Gon, but Haruto's influence prevented him from giving in to his darker impulses. The next morning, Ryo apologizes to everyone for his violent outburst the previous night. However, instead of receiving criticism, he is thanked for saving the girls from a vulnerable situation. As promised, Hayat takes Gon and his accomplices and secures them in the back of a cart to be transported to the prison camp. Before departing, Yuba gives Hayat a letter to deliver to his father, Lord Gyuki. Meanwhile, Shin, Dola, Seo, and Ryo begin their journey to the royal capital to sell their rice. After several days of travel, they arrive and find a place to stay for a while. After an intense duel, Lord Gyuki admitted that Zen was a very skilled fighter. Impressed by Zen's sword fighting and combat skills, Lord Gyuki suggested that he become a guard for the Karasuki royal family. Zen accepted the offer, and that marked the beginning of his love story with Ayame. Around that time, the Karasuki kingdom signed a peace treaty with the Rokurin kingdom, which was supposed to bring an end to the conflict between the two countries. However, during the signing of the peace treaty, the prince of the Rokurin kingdom took an interest in Ayame and ordered his attendant to kidnap her. Fortunately, Zen arrived just in time to knock out the attendant and save Ayame. Unfortunately, Zen's attack accidentally killed the attendant. When the Prince of Rokurin heard about the incident, he was so enraged that he ordered Zen's immediate execution. The Prince of the Rokurin kingdom demanded Ayame's hand in marriage to maintain peace between the two nations. Zen and Ayame had to flee the kingdom together. Lord Gyuki invites Ryo to meet his grandparents, who currently rule the Karasuki kingdom. The next day, Ryo goes to the royal palace and introduces himself to King Homura and Queen Shizuki. Ryo is still shocked that they are his grandparents. He tells them about how a red-haired man named Lucius brutally murdered Ayame. To prepare Ryo for his quest, King Homura tests his strength by making him fight Duki, Karasuki's strongest warrior. The sparring match begins in the courtyard, With Queen Shizuki seated, the two fighters engage in an intense duel, and it initially appears that they're equally matched. However, King Hamura decides to increase the difficulty. He gets serious, engulfs his sword with magic energy, and hurls a powerful sword slash at Ryo. It seems like Ryo is about to lose, but he counters the attack with a clever water spell, and gets his sword to King Hamura's neck, winning the match. Impressed by Ryo's performance, King Hamura concludes that Ryo doesn't need any further training. That night, Ryo goes back to the small village and visits Yuba's house. He tells Ruri that they are cousins, and that he is a prince of the Karasuki Kingdom. Ryo says that he plans to leave the village in a year to return to the land where he grew up. However, he wants to spend more time with them and the villagers before he leaves. Ryo continues to help the villagers with farming, hunting, and anything else they need. One day, while planting rice on the farm, Ryo tells Seo that he will be leaving soon. Seo starts crying immediately, trying to hide it until Ruri interrupts them, which makes Ryo unaware of her tears. For the next 6 months, Seo practices her spirit arts daily. When she feels confident, she takes Ryo into the forest for a private talk. She confesses her love to him, but Ryo says they can't be together because he's leaving the village soon. Desperate to be with him, Seo reveals she's been practicing her spirit arts and claims she's strong enough to join him on his journey. However, Ryo doesn't change his mind and apologizes before leaving her even more heartbroken than before. Eventually, Ryo is ready to leave the village. He says goodbye to Yuba, Ruri, and the villagers before setting off on his journey alone. As he leaves, Seo waits for him at the village exit and finally accepts that he is leaving. They say their goodbyes and promise to meet each other again someday. During his journey, Ryo stops by the forest village and meets with Latifa and the other demi-humans. They give him a warm welcome, and he decides to stay in the village for a few months. He comes up with an idea to build a portable house using his space-time storage device. Dominic offers to help build the house. One day, Ryo finds a strange, naked, pink-haired girl in his bed. The girl tells him that she's a spirit who made a contract with him, but she doesn't remember how. She also doesn't know her name or how they got separated. She communicates with Ryo telepathically and refers to him as Haruto. After promising to keep his past life a secret, the naked spirit girl asks Ryo to give her a name since she can't remember hers. She creates a dress using spirit magic, and Ryo names her Ishia, which means beautiful springtime in the beast people's language. Dreas doesn't know why Ishia lost her memories, but she reveals that she's excellent in all elements of spirit magic, which is very rare. To understand her power, Ryo fights Ishia, using all his skills and magical attacks. However, Ishia counters every attack and mirrors Ryo's fighting techniques, making them very evenly matched. After their fight, Dreas decides to teach Ishia everything about spirits. Days go by, and Ishia gets used to life in the forest village. When Dominic finishes Ryo's house, Ryo announces that he will leave the village in 2 days. The elders give him gifts before he leaves, and Ursula gives him a teleportation device so he can return to the village easily. Sildora gives him earrings that he can use to change his hair color and disguise himself. Ryo says goodbye to everyone and departs with Ishia. Before returning to his homeland, Ryo decides to visit Celia in the Kingdom of Beltrum. When he arrives in the capital, he changes his hair color to avoid being recognized. While keeping a low profile in their disguises, Ryo and Ishia visit a bakery in the capital. They overhear some people discussing a noble's wedding parade happening the next day. That night, they sneak into the Royal Academy, where Celia works, avoiding detection by the guards. However, they find Celia's lab empty, just like when Ryo left it. Desperate for answers, Ryo and Ishia use Ishia's spirit magic to hypnotize a teacher. They learn that Celia is getting married to Charles, a royal guard. Ryo also discovers that the Kingdom of Beltrum suffered a significant defeat to the Proxia Empire while he was away. The hypnotized man reveals that Charles started peace negotiations with the Proxia Empire because the royal family of Beltrum lost power after the Huguenot family fled the capital. The House of Arbor arranged a political marriage with the House of Clare to gain more power. Ryo assumes Celia is being forced into the marriage with Charles. He decides to go and see her. Meanwhile, Celia has accepted her fate and is prepared to become Charles' property after the marriage. She believes she has no choice and thinks the marriage will protect her and her family. She looks at the letter Rio sent her a long time ago and wishes she could see him one more time, because she still has feelings for him. Rio sneaks into Celia's room and she is shocked to see him after so long. It has been 4 years since she last saw him, and she struggles to keep her composure. However, Rio is more concerned about something else. He goes straight to the point and asks her if she is genuinely happy with the marriage arrangements with Charles. Although it is obvious she is lying, Celia insists that she is happy with the arrangements and is prepared to go ahead with the marriage. Rio senses something fishy, but before he can make his point, Celia asks him to leave so they don't get caught and cause any scandalous rumors, or worse, get him in serious trouble. Celia locks herself in her room and cries after Rio leaves. The next day, everyone prepares for the wedding, and Charles introduces Celia to his 6 other wives. The women mock her and inform her that she will be the lowest-ranking wife. Princess Christina arrives and asks to speak with Celia privately. She congratulates Celia on her wedding and reveals that when Duke fled the kingdom, he kidnapped Princess Flora, causing the Beltrum family to lose respect and power. Christina feels responsible for Celia's forced marriage and vows to help her whenever she gets the chance, and the wedding finally begins. A crowd gathers to watch the wedding. Ishia and Rio hide among them, still disguised. The wedding coach stops and Charles offers his hand to Celia. Celia remembers asking Rio if he was willing to marry her and take her to a distant land where they could be together. Charles calls Celia's name, urging her to take his outstretched hand. With a sigh of defeat, she takes it, feeling like a doll about to become Charles's property. Suddenly, they hear the guards shouting for someone to halt. Celia looks over and realizes it's Rio, disguised, running toward the coach. The guards try to hold him back with a human blockade, but he easily breaks it by blasting them with a powerful wind attack. Next, the Mage squad attempts to contain him by shooting him with photon bullets, but Rio dodges all the attacks and simply leaps over them. Rio reaches the coach, but Charles' elite squad stands in his way. Celia worries, but Charles confidently refers to the incoming fight as a show before the ceremony. However, Rio easily defeats the elite guards, leaving Charles dazed. Rio then lands a heavy punch in Charles's gut, knocking him unconscious. Rio grabs Celia and holds a knife to her neck in front of everyone. The crowd watches, enraged, but Rio communicates with Celia telepathically. He tells her it's him and assures her he won't hurt her. Rio reveals he knows she's not getting married willingly and asks her again if she wants to proceed with the wedding while holding the knife against her neck. Rio fights off all the guards and jumps down into a dark alley. He hands Celia over to Ishia and plans to distract the guards while the girls escape the capital and meet up with him later. After the girls leave, Rio returns to the streets to fight all the guards. Despite the intense battle, Rio single-handedly takes on all the guards without killing anyone. When the average guards prove to be no match for him, Alfred, the strongest knight in the kingdom, emerges from the crowd with a mighty sword. The two engage in a fierce battle, and Rio notices that Alfred's sword is coated with magic. However, Rio still manages to block and dodge all his attacks. Alfred tries to finish the fight quickly by casting a spell on his sword and launching a powerful attack on Rio. However, when the dust settles, Rio is gone, and Alfred orders his men to find him. Rio meets up with the girls outside the capital and receives Celia's gratitude for saving her. Suddenly, a thunderstorm starts, and magical beams of light appear all over the land. Aishia senses something is wrong and tells Rio to help someone in need elsewhere. Much later, Rio then saves a boy and 2 girls from the bandits. In an interesting twist, one of whom turns out to be Miharu, his childhood friend. But she doesn't recognize him.